This is a Fox News alert. Police saying the suspect in an Aurora, Illinois industrial park shooting has been neutralized. According to the city of Aurora, 4 police officers were wounded in the incident and are in stable condition. We go now to Jonathan Hunt for the latest. Jonathan.
Dana, the first 911 calls came in at around 1:40 Central Time. That's 2:40 p.m. Eastern. We do not know from officials how this incident played out exactly. We're expecting a news conference with local police and other officials at the bottom of the hour. They will give us the blow-by-blow of what they know. But what we have heard from eyewitnesses is that a worker at the Henry Pratt Company, which is the building you're looking at right there, checked in for work like it was any normal day this morning, and several hours later suddenly began running through that building, in the words of this eyewitness, quote, shooting everyone. We know officially now that 4 police officers were wounded in this. We assume, and it is only an assumption at this point, that they were among the first officers to respond after those initial 911 calls. We are also being told that all 4 of those are in stable condition. Beyond that, we do not know the extent of their injuries. We also do know, though, that the coroner is now on scene. Obviously, a coroner is only called in if there are bodies to be dealt with. So again, our assumption here with the coroner on scene is that at least 1 person is dead. Whether that is a victim or whether that is indeed the shooter, we do not know. The language that officials have used regarding the shooter has changed. The first word we got was from the city of Aurora. They said the shooter had been, quote, apprehended. Then a city of Aurora spokesman later changed that, talking with Shep's news team, to the shooter has been neutralized. And then Aurora police said the shooter is no longer a threat. So all of these questions, what is the condition of the shooter? What is the condition of those injured? We hope to get some answers to in the next 30 minutes or so. But the bottom line, there has been a mass shooting in Aurora, Illinois, west of Chicago. The shooter is neutralized, whatever that means, according to officials. There is no longer a threat. Schools in the area went on immediate lockdown. They have now been told they can lift that lockdown and parents can go and pick up their children. So a sense of relief now there. The area was flooded with first responders, SWAT officers. We saw them at one point rushing into the building, and that appeared to coincide with those first reports we got that the shooter had been apprehended. Now we have seen a lot of those first responders standing around far more relaxed fashion, weapons down. Clearly the threat is over, as Aurora police have told us, but we wait now, Dana, to find out the details from officials of exactly what prompted this shooting and exactly what is the condition of those 4 police officers who were hurt and any other people who were shot in this attack. Dana.
Thank you, Jonathan. We appreciate it. We're monitoring any developments out of Aurora, Illinois, as Jonathan said, and we will update you as we get them. President Trump fighting back against critics during a fiery Rose Garden news conference where he officially declared a national emergency on the southern border.
We're going to be signing today and registering national emergency. And it's a great thing to do because we have an invasion of drugs, invasion of gangs, invasion of people, and it's unacceptable. I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster. And I don't have to do it for the election. I've already done a lot of wall for the election, 2020. And the only reason we're up here talking about this is because of the election.
Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi blasting the decision as a, quote, power grab. They're also signaling that Democrats are ready to fight it out in the courts. President Trump sarcastically responding to any potential legal challenges.
We will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there. and we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court.
Okay, you've been talking about how this has been a civics lesson. He's right. It's not just how the bill becomes a law; it's then how the bill goes to court.
Yes, yes. And he said it in such a kind of a nice sing-songy way that even a child and then this happens. Okay, so the thing that we have to remind everybody when you're listening to smug reporters that when the caravans were here, it was a national emergency. At that time, America was being compared to Nazi Germany because we were separating. Remember, we were separating families and putting children in cages. It was a horrifying humanitarian crisis. So you finally get the president to agree that this is an unacceptable situation and we should apply some solutions. And suddenly the Democrats are mocking it. Oh, it's no longer an emergency, even though we said that it was like Nazi Germany just months ago. So for the media and for the Democrats, the caravan is a national emergency until it's no longer visual. So what you're left with are adults trying to solve the underlying issue that led to this crisis, which is, I mean, think about this, whether it is terror or mass shootings, you don't just assume everything is fine when the attack is over. You go back, you figure out how do you prevent that? That's all that's going on right now. And to laugh at this and say it's not a humanitarian crisis, you were the same people screaming bloody murder.
That it was.
That it was.
We actually have some sound from one of the exchanges with a reporter. You're going to want to talk about this, Pete. Take a listen.
What do you say to your critics who say that you are creating a national emergency, that you're concocting a national emergency here in order to get your wall?
I asked the angel moms, what do you think? Do you think I'm creating something? Ask these incredible women who lost their daughters and their sons. Okay? Because your question is a very political question. Because you have an agenda. No, you get one. You get one.
Well, the second
Just sit
question
down.
is...
Wait, sit down. Sit down.
Could you please answer?
Sit down. You get one question.
Pete, you're sitting.
I said the same
Stand
thing
up,
about
Pete.
kids last night. Sit. I will say, you talked about visuals, Greg.
Yeah.
The angel moms were the most powerful part of this press conference. He used them in his opening remarks. And then when Jim Acosta tried to come at him and use the stats and talk about the stats, he said, there you are. The left does the emotional visuals so well, so often. And we rarely see that from conservatives or Republicans because we talk stats.
No, if you do, they get made fun of.
Yeah, they get made fun of. We talk stats, but that visual right there, these are people affected by this. And the comparison is, remember when the left and the media went wall to wall on the very unfortunate circumstance where the two kids who were handed over to ICE in custody as their parents brought them on the perilous journey passed away after everything we do for them? That was wall to wall coverage. There's almost no coverage other than this channel on these angel moms and these circumstances when illegals go wrong. That's the point the president is making. I think a lot of people watching this feel that viscerally.
And did Acosta ask President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and all the Democrats? Did he stop them and say, you know, is this a manufactured humanitarian crisis when they were all out there calling? There were clips of Obama and Pelosi and all these Democrats calling it and acknowledging that this was a humanitarian crisis. No reporters questioned them on it. They all said, oh, yeah, they want to address it. They want to do something about it. He had no choice but to do this national emergency. This was not my first choice.
He did have a choice.
I mean, he could have taken the original deal, which was terrible. He could have taken this new bill that's an atrocity, as I said yesterday. But the bottom line is, as I said yesterday also, it's either a national emergency or it's not. And he was in a position now where he felt like there's no movement for me here. I'm not getting any help from Democrats. They're not interested at this point in calling this what it is, which is a national emergency, because to do that would give me a victory in 2020 or would give some credence to what I've been saying. So unless I actually declare this and figure out a way to move some of this money around, I'm not going to get the money for the wall. They're not interested in the barriers. And they put so many obstacles forth in this spending bill that, you know, you can't have this type of wall. You can't have a wall of that type in this place, enabling towns and counties.
Can't disrupt the butterflies.
Right, you can't do anything, essentially.
Let me mention one that in my ear, they tell me that just FYI, the House Judiciary Committee has announced that they are launching an immediate investigation into this executive action. They've sent letters to the president to that effect. Let's get your thoughts. You haven't spoken yet.
Well, I think the key thing for me is that the Justice Department told them there's a high litigation risk with this strategy. I don't think there's an emergency of any kind. To say there's a humanitarian crisis, well, I guess there was a humanitarian crisis in December. I guess there was a humanitarian crisis 2 years ago.
So you don't want to fix it?
Let me finish. And so you have a situation where he didn't declare an emergency then. Now, today, and I think this was telling, he says, you know what, I don't need to do this, but I'd rather do it faster. Boy, if I was a lawyer, I'd say, Your Honor, the president said he doesn't need to do this. There's no invasion. There's nobody attacking America. This is not a military
When another child
situation.
dies, you will change your mind.
This is a situation where I think it was Ann Coulter, a real conservative, who said the only national emergency is the president is an idiot. And that was that.
So now you agree with Ann Coulter.
And so this is,
She changes her mind every day. How
but
she
to
feels
me,
about
you
it.
look at the idea of the national emergency, and what I see is that you guys are saying, well, maybe because you want to support the president. I can appreciate that.
No.
But I got to tell you something. The Wall Street Journal editorial page, National Review. I could even go on. The number of Republicans in the Senate, including Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority, who tried to get the president to say, don't do this because there's one day going to be President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and boy, you don't want to give her this authority.
But you know what? What's great now is I want to hear the Dems tell me that fentanyl is no longer a problem, human trafficking is no longer a problem, gang violence is no longer a problem, sexual abuse is no longer a problem. The Dems are walking into a huge trap. It's already happening. You saw it with
tear
Beto.
the wall down.
Yeah, no, all you have to do.
Can we play that?
Yeah, sure.
Watch this.
If you could, would you take the wall down now? Here.
Yes.
Like you have a wall.
Absolutely.
Knock it down.
I'd take the wall
And
down.
do you think the city, if there's a referendum here in this city, that would pass?
I do. It's cost us tens of billions of dollars to build and to maintain, and it has pushed migrants and asylum seekers and refugees to the most inhospitable, the most hostile stretches of the U.S.-Mexico border, ensuring their suffering and death.
That'll come back.
Well, no, okay,
yeah,
this is, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that if they believe something is immoral, shouldn't you remove the existing immorality? Yeah. And that is the existing walls. So it's a trap that they've walked into, and now he says yes. And you know who else said yes? Kirsten Gillibrand. Is it Gillibrand or Gillibrand? Whatever. Anyway, the point is, now... Gillibrand, thank you. So the fact is, each one is now going to be faced with this question wherever they go, and they're going to have to, they have two choices: remove the immorality or side with Trump.
It's not a case of
Kirsten.
It's not a case of of whether the national emergency is now or 2 months ago. The president has said it's an emergency for that long. Congress can't figure it out. They can't address it. They haven't been able to deal with the emergency as a result. As the executive who's charged with our security, he says, I have to take it in my own hands.
It's not a security issue.
Drugs.
It's not
drug trafficking.
And
Drug trafficking.
They're lying about the stats on the border. When apprehensions comes down,
we got to run.
No, let me finish up here. Well, you know, when the president says, oh, this is about drugs, most drugs come through legal ports of entry. When the president says it's about illegal immigration, guess what? Illegal immigration is down substantially, like radically, since 2000.
What about the human
because of walls.
Oh my, no, it's not because
no
of
problems
walls.
here.
And you talk about walls. There are other ways. There's
you guys,
fencing,
we have to run.
drones.
We've got to go.
But, you know, to me, it's like you don't want to hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to hear it.
Another new twist in the Jussie Smollett
We've
case.
been talking
We're gonna
about it
bring
for a year.
Breaking details to you next.
News out of Chicago. Police arresting 2 suspects in the alleged hate crime attack on Empire actor Jussie Smollett. It's the latest new twist in that mysterious but developing story. Chicago police now say they are holding 2 men identified in security video from the area where Smollett says he was attacked. Smollett claiming 2 people hurled racist, homophobic slurs at him and told him, quote, "This is MAGA country." The suspects have now been identified by police as Nigerian brothers, police saying one of them worked on the set of Empire. On Wednesday, Smollett was asked by ABC if the men on the security video were his attackers.
I don't have any doubt in my mind that that's them. Never did.
This follows reports by local news outlets that the attack on Smollett was a hoax. Police later responding to that, saying it was not a hoax and that Smollett, quote, continues to be treated as a victim, not a suspect. Jedediah, it's such a strange story. It seems to change, but we had these reports in Chicago suggesting that maybe this was something that was staged with these men. One of them had been an extra on the Empire show. Because Smollett was worried that he was going to be written out of the script of Empire. What do you make
Which
of that?
Fox Entertainment came out and said that's not true. He wasn't going to be written out of that. I don't know. It's interesting. And where did those reports originate from? Because once those reports came out, the Chicago local police came out immediately and said we're not going to substantiate this. He's not being investigated. We are not confirming these reports. I don't know what happened here, and I don't think any of us do, and it remains to be seen. That's why an investigation needs to happen. The thing that interests me most still is his phone records, though, because now he has turned over his phone records 13 days later, but they're redacted. They're not complete. And, you know, the police that are working with him are saying, listen, can you hand this stuff over? Because in the form that you're handing them over, there's not enough information here for us to be able to tell if you were on the phone with your agent and people were making racist or homophobic slurs in the background. We need to be able to hear that so that we can figure out what happened here, we can corroborate your story, and we can get the people who did. So my only struggle with this story is why has he not turned that over? And if he wants this to be a criminal investigation, without that information, it doesn't meet the burden of proof for a criminal investigation. So that's my struggle here. Why not? Why not just hand them over?
Well, I mean, he says that the reason that he didn't do that is because there are important people in his phone and his family. And also he says, you know, he's a gay man and he has pictures there. Doesn't want everybody to see them. So, Pete, what's interesting is, of course, the subtext of this is people saying, well, maybe this guy made it up. Maybe he's attacking President Trump and Make America Great Again and the hat. So he says in the interview, he wouldn't need to mention a MAGA hat, because that's like putting a cherry on a racist sundae. He said these men called him a homophobic slur and the N-word.
Well, I don't know. I mean, none of it adds up. We don't know. So I'm not going to say what did or did not happen. Listen, the MAGA hat could be the point or the cherry on top. Who knows? I still don't like at all the idea of hate crimes. Either you commit a crime. No, in a different way. Either you commit a crime or you don't. What the motivation in your heart is actually doesn't matter at all. Whether you're a racist or a homophobe or whatever, if you mug someone, you rape someone, you assault someone, you're committing a crime. I don't care what your motivations are. So the whole conversation to me here is absurd. If he made it up, it was probably to make a point or for an ulterior motive. About Trump or about racism, I don't know. If he didn't, it's an unfortunate circumstance we may not get to the bottom of. It all feels icky to me, and I don't know where it goes.
So, Dana, one of the interesting angles on this is, could it be that he's the victim? Derek Johnson, the head of the NAACP, saying today the media is demonizing the victim.
Well, this is kind of a weird thing, right? Because the media is covering a story, and one of the things that they complained about was the media using the word allegedly. Okay, but actually that's just AP style. That's like what you are taught in journalism school, Ron, right? I mean, they were complaining about using the word allegedly. Like, well, no, that's actually what you do in these things. So I would say justice is slow. And oftentimes we want things in a second, right? If we press a button, the food delivery comes, like we want it immediately, and justice takes a long time. So we have to give the investigators a little bit more.
So, Greg, he seems to say that these are the guys who did it, right?
Yeah.
He did say that if he had said that they were Muslim or Mexican, maybe more people would have believed them, but they're black guys, Nigerians.
Well, this is where the media narrative goes up in smoke. I appreciate how careful and restrained we are on this story, and how careful and restrained the media is everywhere on this story. Nothing like the Covington story. You want to compare stories?
Yes.
Let's compare the Covington story to the Smollett story, okay? There are two similar. There's the similarity in the rush to judge a specific group. In this case, it was the Covington kids. In this case, it was racist, homophobic, mysterious men. It turns out that half of that is gone. It's not racist. Right? So that part of the piece is gone. But the media will not, the media will adjust their narrative without admitting their error. They won't say, whoops, we were wrong on that. Maybe it's just a homophobic attack. To your point, it's an attack. Yep. But it's like they kind of ignore the fact that they were wrong on that, as well as attributing this to an atmosphere that encourages hostility. This whole thing like, well, this is happening in Trump's America, even if it's a strange story with a lot of weird holes and some things don't make sense. But you know what? It's about surging hostility. It's about smearing Trump and Trump values, modern day lynchings. Those were the words that were being used. A lot of this stuff happened at the beginning in the rush to judgment. And now we're looking at it and we're going, okay, there's something else going on here. I don't want to believe that he planned it, because I don't believe anybody would be sick enough to risk a race war in order to keep his job on a TV show. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that that's not true. He might have known these guys. These guys might have planned it. The story is extremely strange. But it's the media, in my mind, that is at fault about this, because they created an atmosphere that makes it quick to judge anybody. The assumptions are that this is the type of person who did it. It's the rush. It happened with Covington, and it happened here. And we don't know how this is going to end. We don't know what these guys did. These guys might be innocent. Who knows?
Enabled by social media, too, because when you have social media, you have a rush to not only tell your version of the story, which you think is true, but also to hate on everybody who disagrees.
All right, coming up, Trump's latest physical, creating a media firestorm. That's next, right here on The Five.
That point, that makes sense. Isn't the answer, though, to lower taxes on the other businesses rather than either kicking Amazon out or?
Well, I mean, that's the same thing Governor Cuomo is saying with the new tax rules. Why the blue cities paying such a price? Because they have such high taxes. But just judging by this, let's leave the tax system the way it is. The liberal mayor of New York and the liberal governor of New York combined to lure Amazon to New York City, Long Island City specifically, and they beat out 200 cities. To get a #1 draft pick, to get LeBron James or to get Mike Trout, you have to bring in and make it incentives because they're rare talents. Amazon is a company that is as good as any in the country, a great story. They were going to get $8 million worth of square feet of in Long Island City. They were going to pay for. They were going to revamp. They were going to give Plaxall pay $295,000 per square foot to take over their plant. They were going to bring in countless jobs at the average pay between $150,000 and $175,000. It's just the beginning. Amazon's going to grow. It would be an attraction for everyone to come. You have to do a lot to get a lot. This was an investment, which just shows you if the Democratic Party wants to live off this investment, this is part of that socialist attitude. I hate rich, successful people. I hate big, successful businesses. If that's what they're going to run on, they're in a lot of trouble.
They have no tax revenue. They now have no tax revenue to fund all of these, the Green New Deal and this and everything you want to do.
Well, and Cuomo already announced a budget shortfall, and we have rich people fleeing the city of New York because of the high cost of living and also taxes here. I know, the taxes are abysmal living in New York City. I can attest for moving here. But it's funny because Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, tweeted out and he said, look, the left is basically, this is what you get when you push socialism, when you're hostile to business. And then he reminded everyone that Texas is #1 for business, trying to send that message out. So funny for him to get on this. But I think it's becoming increasingly clear, and I'd love to get Jess's opinion on this, that the Democrat Party is beholden to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she was the one that was leading the charge on this. You look at the Green Deal and look at how many 2020 presidential contenders signed up for this ridiculous pipe dream, which is the Green Deal. So the Democrat Party is beholden to her. And what's the ramifications of that?
Well, the ramifications in this moment, and it's not just her, she did have some buddies that were working on this with her, is that state senators, very powerful, obviously, that we are divided on this issue. And I think the most important reactions that I've seen are from the people who run affordable housing projects in New York, for instance, the NYCHA Housing Board. You had Congressman Gregory Meeks, who came out against this, Carolyn Maloney, people who have long represented people in this city who are saying, we wanted this. We needed this. And you're right, over 200 cities competed, and we won because of this. And I've always had difficulty with the argument that if you're running against the system, you have to do everything outside of it. And Hillary Clinton got a lot of flack for running within the system, saying, I can change things if I'm inside of it. And what's going on with the progressive movement is they're saying you can't take any corporate money, you can't work with big companies. And the truth is we do need change, but you need to be able to do that from the inside. And getting Amazon here is a way to not only create jobs, but to start a more productive national conversation about how to change the way that corporates...
Yeah, it's an interesting argument. All right. Republicans say they want answers from Andrew McCabe after the former acting FBI director reportedly said in a bombshell interview that DOJ officials talked about possibly using the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. But McCabe now pushing back, saying his comments were taken out of context. The very latest on that next.
What actual evidence did you have that the Trump campaign was colluding with Russians? You had none. They had zero. They conspired early on in 2016 to open a counterintelligence investigation into a political campaign.
Welcome back. Well, there's growing fallout from former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe's 60 Minutes interview promoting his new book. And McCabe's spokeswoman is now pushing back on reporting that McCabe said that he and senior Justice Department officials discussed a plan to potentially remove President Trump from office, saying no serious discussions took place and McCabe's comments were taken out of context. Now Republicans on the House and Senate Judiciary Committee are calling for McCabe to testify. They also want to hear from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. The top Republican on House Judiciary says that McCabe's reported comments confirm Americans' worst fears about corruption at the DOJ. Listen.
This was a time in which we actually see our Department of Justice using the full force of its power to actually contemplate what could be nothing less than a coup. It's not the FBI as a whole. It goes back to this one cabal that continues to fester, and they found their time in that 8 days after Mr. Comey was fired. They said, this is our time to act.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has more. Catherine, what do we need to know?
Okay, so let's start, Lisa, with late yesterday, the chairman of the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee that has direct oversight for the FBI and the Justice Department told Fox News that he would not rule out compelling testimony from the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein as well as the former FBI Director Andrew McCabe about two issues. One was any discussions about recording the president, and the second was removing him from office under the 25th Amendment.
I mean, you're having a conversation about whether or not you're going to invoke the 25th Amendment. So I would imagine if the shoe were on the other foot, my Democratic colleagues would want to know about that conversation if it involved a Democrat.
I want to go back to the statement that we have just received from a spokesperson for the former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. And as I read it, I want you to listen and pay attention closely to the language because it's very limiting, but acknowledges that there may have been some discussions about these issues. It states, certain statements by Mr. McCabe in interviews associated with the release of his book have been taken out of context and misrepresented. To clarify, at no time did Mr. McCabe participate in any, this is the key word, extended discussions about the use of the 25th Amendment, nor is he aware of any such discussions. He was present, participated in a discussion that included a comment by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein regarding the 25th Amendment. This anecdote was not included in his book. Now, if you've been following our reporting here at Fox News, this is really important because the FBI's former general counsel, that's the FBI's top lawyer, James Baker, testified under oath last fall. So that's a threat of perjury if he lies, that he had heard directly from Andrew McCabe and FBI lawyer Lisa Page about conversations they said they had with the Deputy Attorney General covering both of these issues, the 25th Amendment and recording or wearing a wire with the president. So we've got these sort of parsed statements from McCabe, and then we also have this under oath testimony from the FBI's top lawyer that conflicts with what they've issued today, Lisa.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Brian, I'm going to start with you. Where are we now on this? Where does this leave us? You know, you have this article from the New York Times. Now you've got McCabe's spokeswoman kind of clarifying, kind of not. You also have James Baker under oath. So where does this leave?
I can just go by with the excerpts I've seen from CBS and the coverage I've seen in the New York Times. But I will say this. It's easy to say Donald Trump says this and the FBI says that, or James Comey. They have a problem with each other. You know, Rosenstein says one thing, Comey says one thing, and McCabe says another. They all can't be lying. They all can't be telling the truth because they diverge. Number two is, keep in mind, this is a guy that came out and was told by the FBI you weren't telling the truth, so therefore we're going to let you go. And when the IG looked at what McCabe did, they gave him a criminal referral. And days before he was about to get his pension and retire, they fired him. So that's the mindset of somebody who has to keep that in mind when you're reading his account of what happened.
Well, so what should Congress do next? I know Senator Graham said that he might compel them to testify, both McCabe and Rosenstein. Does that need to happen, and what questions need to be asked?
I mean, nothing ever comes of that. So I hate that route when they go. I understand why they want to do it, but nothing ever comes of that. No one ever gets punished. What's interesting to me about this is, so you heard in that statement from the spokesperson, they said the anecdote isn't in the book, that this is something he's just saying as he's going out and doing interviews about the book. This isn't the first time that we've heard this, and the New York Times is corroborating it as well, saying that he also said it to us. He said to CBS that they sat there and they had this serious conversation about removing the president, wearing a wire, nobody was kidding, and then he said it to CBS, he said it to the New York Times. The clarification there, she says they didn't have an extended conversation. What does that mean? So they just briefly talked about doing this. I think that what is terrifying about this to the rest of America who's paying attention is that you seem to have this ruling class in Washington who has a grip on power, whether they are politicians, whether they are political figures in the top of these different departments, even in some cases journalists, people who are invested in the power that they have in Washington. And President Trump has upended that power they've carved for themselves, and he's threatened it. And I think that that's driving a bunch of people to do crazy things like potentially this.
Well, Liz, what do you make of what Melissa just said?
It's important because the FBI itself does not have a role in applying the 25th Amendment. But it's clear that FBI officials apparently reportedly took it upon themselves. The New York Times has access to a memo involving Andrew McCabe saying, quote, yes, we did discuss the president's capacity and his removal from office under the 25th Amendment. I know in just working, I've been a business journalist for 30 years. I have FBI sources. They tell me they don't like the power structure inside the FBI in D.C., that they appear to be a law unto themselves, where the field offices have problems in rendering what their job is supposed to be, dealing with that kind of construct.
Well, Jess, I want to make sure you get in here as well. So we've got James Baker under oath. You've got Peter Strzok talking about insurance policies and text messages, obviously a very clear bias towards the president. Then you also have the Senate Intel Committee recently saying that they don't see any evidence of collusion. Are President Trump's criticisms of the Russia investigation correct? Is there any fairness to that, considering taking the totality of all this information?
I think that we have to be consistent here, that until Bob Mueller publishes his report, we don't know what happened here.
So what would it have to say, though? Let me be devil's advocate. What would that report have to say to justify them wanting to wear a wire and trap him? Would it have to say that he himself colluded with Putin and he's a puppet of Putin?
And I heard that over the weekend after Senator Richard Burr made his comment, on Sunny Hostin on The View, said, do we need a call from Vladimir Putin to President Trump saying, hey, I got your back?
I didn't see that.
Well, yeah. I caught it, and it was widely disseminated. And there are definitely different gradations of collusion that would satisfy people, and that's why I leave it up to Bob Mueller to tell us what this is. But I just want to make a more general point that all of this happens because people are writing books when they shouldn't be writing books.
Well,
if you just left, you were just ahead of the FBI, take a breather. I mean, if people are in your text messages because you were having an affair, don't write a book. Just take a moment.
All right, well,
I love it. Except for Omarosa, that was perfect.
But I didn't even love her book.
Well, we do need to get to the bottom of this because I think for a lot of Americans it's very disturbing. Well, but there are new signs that former Vice President Joe Biden is all but certain to make a 2020 run, joining a very crowded field. This is former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld is announcing that he may challenge President Trump in a Republican primary. So what to make of all of this ahead of 2020? We're going to debate it. Stay with us.
Former VP Joe Biden appears to be moving closer to a 2020 White House bid. A source telling Fox News that Biden is almost certain to run and is reaching out to former colleagues on Capitol Hill, along with activists and donors. All this as a Fox News poll finds 55% believe Democrats' chances of beating President Trump in 2020 are either excellent or good. Meantime, former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld announcing today he is exploring a Republican primary challenge to President Trump in 2020. Take a listen.
Our president is simply too unstable to carry out the duties of the highest executive office in the land. The lights are on in the White House, but no one's at home.
And a Fox News poll finds 15% of Trump voters would rather see someone else as the Republican 2020 nominee. Okay, so we've been talking for a while about who is the Republican that's going to get in here for the challenge. Do you expect it to be Weld, or you see John Kasich soon?
Yeah, no, Weld has got a lot of momentum, especially as the running mate for Johnson last time. I'm being sarcastic. There's nothing there's nothing more that would make less noise than Bill Weld deciding to run against the President of the United States. Would mean, I don't even know if it means the President has to show up anywhere. You don't have to cover the results. I am, for a president that is so unorthodox as this president, knowing that George W. Bush, H.W. Bush had a challenge, and remember that Jimmy Carter had a big challenge. I thought for sure there would be people, high-profile people going after him. I'm not sure the window's been closed yet, but I don't think he's worried about Bill Weld.
Melissa, do you think he's worried about anyone, and who might that anyone be?
On the Republican side?
Yeah.
No, I don't think. No, that's like.
Do you think he's worried about Biden or Kamala or?
Well, personally, I'm not inside his head, so I have no idea. I would imagine he's not actually worried about anyone, but I would say that